In a quiet suburban home in Cincinnati, Ohio, an 8-year-old boy named Daniel Thompson sat at the breakfast table on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March 2019 when something extraordinary happened. He looked up from his cereal, turned to his mother Rachel, and said something that would change everything. "Mom, I used to live in the White House. I remember the rooms. I remember everything." Rachel smiled, assuming her son was talking about a dream or perhaps something he'd seen on television. But what Daniel said next made her pause. There was a room on the second floor, oval-shaped, with yellow walls. I could see the gardens from there. I had a dog named Fala who slept by my wheelchair. Rachel felt her hands go cold. Daniel had never studied American presidents in school. They didn't own history books about Franklin D. Roosevelt. Yet here was her son, describing specific details about FDR's private life with a clarity that seemed impossible. Rachel Thompson had always considered herself a rational person. She worked as a software engineer, prided herself on logical thinking, and had little patience for supernatural claims. But watching her son describe the interior of the White House with architectural precision, she felt the foundations of her worldview beginning to shift. Daniel wasn't guessing or imagining. He was remembering. The certainty in his voice carried a weight that transcended childhood fantasy. Over the following days, Daniel's statements became more detailed and more unsettling. He described the weight of paralysis, the feeling of being unable to move his legs, the frustration and determination that defined his days. He talked about radio broadcasts, about choosing words carefully because the entire nation was listening. He mentioned specific people by name: Harry Hopkins, Eleanor, Missy LeHand, relationships that a third grader from Ohio should have had no knowledge of whatsoever. Rachel began documenting everything. She kept a detailed journal, recording Daniel's statements verbatim before checking any historical sources. She wanted to preserve the purity of his memories before contamination from research could cloud the investigation. Daniel would make statements like, "There was a painting of a ship in the study. I looked at it when I was tired. It helped me think." Rachel would write this down, date it, and only afterward would she begin the painstaking process of verification. What she discovered left her shaken. Time and again, Daniel's memories aligned with historical records, including details that weren't common knowledge, things that wouldn't appear in elementary school textbooks or typical documentary films. The painting of the ship existed. The oval room with yellow walls on the second floor was real. Even small, seemingly insignificant details checked out. Dr. James Harrison from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies received Rachel's inquiry in late April 2019. He had spent 20 years investigating cases of children who claimed memories of previous lives. The FDR case immediately caught his attention because of the specificity involved and because Daniel was older than typical subjects. Most past life memories emerge between ages 2 and 5, then faded by age 7 or 8. That Daniel was describing these experiences at 8 suggested something unusual was happening. Dr. Harrison traveled to Cincinnati in May 2019 to begin formal interviews. He brought with him a structured protocol developed over decades of research. The methodology was careful, designed to distinguish genuine anomalous memories from confabulation, fantasy, or information acquired through normal means. The first interview took place in the Thompson living room on a Saturday morning. Daniel seemed like any other 8-year-old at first, shy, fidgeting slightly, more interested in the Spider-Man action figure on the coffee table than in talking to a stranger. Dr. Harrison began with open-ended questions, allowing Daniel to describe his memories in his own words without leading or suggesting details. "Tell me about the house you remember," Dr. Harrison said gently. Daniel's demeanor shifted. His fidgeting stopped. When he spoke, his voice carried a different quality, not exactly adult, but certainly older than his years. It wasn't just a house. It was the center of everything. People were always there, always needing something, always worried. I felt the weight of it constantly. He paused, looking past Dr. Harrison as if seeing something in the distance. The Oval Office downstairs. That's where the decisions happened. But upstairs in the private rooms, that's where I could breathe. Dr. Harrison presented Daniel with a series of photographs. Some were authentic images of White House interiors from the 1930s and 1940s. Others were from similar buildings, other government structures, grand homes from the same era. Daniel studied each photograph carefully. When shown an image of the actual second-floor Oval Room, he immediately responded, "That's it. That's the room." But the furniture was different in my time. The desk was by the window, not the wall. Dr. Harrison made notes. Later verification with White House historical records would confirm that the furniture arrangement Daniel described matched the room's configuration during Roosevelt's presidency, not its appearance in the 1990s when the photograph was taken. Daniel couldn't have known this from the image itself. The photograph showed a later arrangement. Over several sessions, Dr. Harrison employed multiple verification strategies. He asked Daniel to draw floor plans of the White House second floor from memory. Daniel's sketches, crude as they were with an 8-year-old's drawing skills, showed accurate spatial relationships between rooms. He placed the Oval Room, the private study, and the bedroom suite in their correct positions. When Dr. Harrison introduced deliberate errors, asking whether a particular room was on the left or right a hallway, sometimes reversing the actual layout, Daniel consistently corrected him. "No, the study was on this side. I remember because the light came in differently in the afternoon." These weren't lucky guesses. The consistency and confidence suggested genuine spatial memory. The details about FDR's dog Fala particularly intrigued Dr. Harrison. Daniel described Fala's personality, his habits, even the specific way the Scottish Terrier would rest his head on Roosevelt's lap during evening reading sessions. "Fala was more than a pet," Daniel said during one interview. "He was company when the loneliness got heavy. When everyone else wanted something from me, Fala just wanted to be near me." This emotional insight matched what historians knew about Roosevelt's attachment to Fala, but it reflected an internal, emotional experience that wouldn't typically appear in historical accounts. Daniel was describing how it felt to be FDR, not just for citing facts about him. Rachel Thompson struggled with what to do with this information. Part of her wanted to dismiss it, to find a rational explanation that would restore normal order to their lives. She researched extensively, trying to find any possible source Daniel might have encountered. Had he seen a documentary at a friend's house? Had a teacher mentioned FDR in passing? She checked his browsing history, examined every book in their home, questioned his teachers and playmates. Nothing explained the depth and specificity of his knowledge. Daniel had no unusual interest in history. His favorite activities were soccer, video games, and drawing superheroes. The FDR memories seemed to exist in isolation, disconnected from his normal childhood interests and experiences. Dr. Harrison arranged for Daniel to visit Washington, D.C. in September 2019. The trip was designed as a verification exercise. Rather than simply touring the White House as a visitor, Dr. Harrison wanted to observe Daniel's reactions to the actual locations he claimed to remember. The White House tour would be standard, covering public spaces that thousands of visitors saw each year. But Dr. Harrison would carefully note whether Daniel showed recognition beyond what the tour guide explained. As they walked through the East Room, Daniel stopped abruptly. "This is where the concerts were," he said quietly. "I remember listening to Marian Anderson practice." Her voice filled the whole space. Rachel exchanged glances with Dr. Harrison. Marian Anderson had indeed performed at the White House during Roosevelt's presidency, but this wasn't common knowledge, and it certainly wasn't mentioned on standard White House tours. The moment that convinced even the skeptical Secret Service agent escorting their tour group came when Daniel paused near an unmarked door in a public corridor. "That goes to the private elevator," he said matter-of-factly. The agent's expression shifted from polite boredom to sharp attention. The private elevator Daniel mentioned did exist behind that door, but there was no external indication of this, no signage, nothing that would tell a visitor what lay beyond. "How do you know about the elevator?" the agent asked carefully. Daniel shrugged. "I use it every day. My legs didn't work well. The stairs were difficult." The agent looked at Dr. Harrison, then at Rachel, his professional composure visibly shaken. Throughout the Washington trip, Daniel displayed what researchers call behavioral memories, Not just factual knowledge, but procedural understanding and emotional responses that suggested lived experience. When they visited the FDR Memorial, Daniel became visibly emotional. He stood for a long time before the statue of Roosevelt in his wheelchair, tears streaming down his face. "People didn't see this part," he whispered. "They didn't know how hard it was, how much it hurt some days. But I never let them see." Rachel knelt beside her son, holding him as he wept for reasons she couldn't fully comprehend. This wasn't a child reciting history. This was someone processing grief and memory from a perspective that transcended his young life. Dr. Harrison conducted cognitive testing to rule out various psychological explanations. He evaluated Daniel for conditions that might produce false memories or confabulation. The results showed a neurotypical 8-year-old with normal cognitive function. There was no evidence of dissociative disorders, no indication of the kind of fantasy proneness that might explain elaborate fictional narratives. Daniel distinguished clearly between his current life and his FDR memories. He didn't believe he was Roosevelt in the present. He simply remembered having been Roosevelt in what felt like another lifetime. This distinction was important. It suggested integration rather than dissociation, memory rather than delusion. The relationship Daniel described with Eleanor Roosevelt particularly fascinated researchers. He spoke of her with a complex mixture of respect, affection, and frustration. "She wanted to do so much," Daniel said during one interview. "Sometimes more than was possible. We didn't always agree, but I trusted her judgment on things I couldn't see clearly myself." This nuanced portrayal matched historical understanding of the Roosevelt marriage, a partnership characterized by mutual respect and shared purpose despite personal complications. Daniel described private conversations, disagreements about policy, moments of connection and distance. These weren't the simplified narratives of textbooks, but the complicated reality of an actual relationship. When Dr. Harrison asked Daniel about specific historical events, the responses were revealing in their limitations as well as their accuracies. Daniel had clear, detailed memories of the emotional experience of giving fireside chats, the nervousness before speaking, the careful attention to word choice, the awareness of millions listening, but he struggled with exact dates or the chronological sequence of events. This pattern actually supported authenticity. If Daniel had memorized historical information, he would likely recall dates and sequences. Instead, he remembered how things felt, the sensory and emotional dimensions of experience. This matched the typical pattern of genuine autobiographical memory, which prioritizes personal significance over chronological precision. The verification process extended beyond architectural details and historical facts. Dr. Harrison consulted with historians specializing in the Roosevelt presidency, presenting Daniel's statements without identifying their source. These experts confirmed that many of Daniel's descriptions reflected insider perspectives not available in published sources. For instance, Daniel described a particular quirk of Roosevelt's, a habit of drumming his fingers in a specific pattern on his wheelchair armrest when thinking through difficult problems. This detail appeared in unpublished diary entries of White House staff, but wasn't part of the public historical record. How Daniel knew this remained unexplained through conventional means. Rachel Thompson's perspective evolved throughout the investigation. Initially desperate for a normal explanation, she gradually accepted that something genuinely anomalous was occurring. This acceptance brought its own challenges. How did she parent a child who claimed memories of being president? How did she help Daniel integrate these memories with his current identity? She connected with other parents whose children had reported past life memories, finding community with people who understood the peculiar challenges involved. These conversations helped her recognize that Daniel's experience, while unusual, followed patterns documented in hundreds of similar cases worldwide. By the child's 9th birthday in November 2019, the FDR memories were beginning to fade, a typical pattern in such cases. Daniel could still recall major elements, but found the details increasingly difficult to access. "It's like trying to remember a dream," he told Dr. Harrison during their final formal interview. "I know it happened, but the edges are blurry now." This natural fading process actually provided additional evidence for the authenticity of the memories. If Daniel were fabricating or fantasizing, there would be no reason for the memories to deteriorate in this particular way. The pattern matched the typical trajectory of early childhood memories, vivid when fresh, gradually becoming more diffuse while retaining emotional and thematic cores. Dr. Harrison's final report, completed in March 2020, carefully documented the case without claiming definitive conclusions about mechanism or explanation. The report noted the consistent accuracy of verifiable details, the age-appropriate limitations in Daniel's historical knowledge, and the pattern of emergence and fading consistent with other documented cases. Dr. Harrison wrote, "The Thompson case presents significant evidential value for the hypothesis that some children access genuine memories of previous lives. While definitive proof remains elusive, the accumulation of specific, verifiable details that Daniel possessed without apparent normal means of acquisition warrants serious consideration of survival of consciousness as one possible explanation among several that deserve continued investigation." The question of how Daniel could know what he knew remained open. Several theoretical frameworks offered partial explanations. The survival hypothesis suggested consciousness surviving biological death and reincarnating. The super-psi hypothesis proposed that Daniel somehow accessed information through currently unknown psychic means. Genetic memory theories speculated about information transmission through biological inheritance, though Daniel shared no ancestral connection to Roosevelt. Each framework had strengths and weaknesses. Each raised new questions, even as it attempted to answer existing ones. What remained undeniable was the human dimension of Daniel's experience. Regardless of mechanism, an 8-year-old boy had lived for months carrying memories of being one of the most significant figures in American history. He had processed emotions and experiences far beyond his years. He had demonstrated knowledge that challenged conventional understanding of how minds work and what memories can contain. The case forced reconsideration of assumptions about consciousness, identity, and the boundaries of self. If Daniel truly remembered being FDR, what did that mean for understanding who we are and whether we persist beyond a single lifetime? Rachel Thompson reflected on the experience in an interview conducted a year after the memories had faded. "I don't know what to believe about reincarnation or consciousness or any of that," she said. "What I know is that my son had knowledge he shouldn't have had." He described experiences that affected him emotionally in profound ways. Whether he was remembering a past life or something else entirely was happening, it was real to him, and the details checked out again and again. That's what I have to work with. As a mother, I had to support him through it. As a rational person, I had to acknowledge I couldn't explain it. This humility in the face of mystery characterized the most thoughtful responses to the case. Daniel himself, at age 10, when interviewed in 2021, maintained his conviction about the reality of the memories while accepting their strange nature. "I know it sounds crazy," he said with the self-awareness of a child who had spent years defending his experiences. "But I remember being President Roosevelt the same way I remember my 6th birthday party or my first day of school. It's just a memory. It happened. I don't know how or why, but I know it's true." This certainty, combined with his otherwise entirely normal childhood, created a striking contrast. Daniel was simultaneously an ordinary kid who loved video games and soccer, and someone who claimed to remember leading the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. The case entered the research literature as one of the strongest American examples of past life memory claims. It joined hundreds of similar cases documented worldwide, part of a larger pattern that suggested something real and important was being reported, even if complete understanding remained elusive. Researchers continued to follow Daniel's development, tracking whether the faded memories would resurface in adolescence or adulthood, a pattern observed in some previous cases. The investigation continued, expanded, evolved. For viewers fascinated by questions of consciousness, memory, and the possibility that identity extends beyond a single lifetime, the Daniel Thompson case offers compelling evidence worthy of serious consideration. This investigation into an 8-year-old boy's detailed memories of being Franklin D. Roosevelt demonstrates the careful, systematic approach necessary when examining claims that challenge conventional understanding. If this exploration of consciousness and possible past life memory resonates with you, subscribe to this channel for more in-depth investigations into cases that push the boundaries of what we think we know about minds, memories, and the nature of human identity. Each case we examine brings us closer to understanding whether consciousness truly transcends the limits of a single biological lifetime, and what that might mean for how we understand ourselves and our place in the larger mystery of existence.